This is it's ephemeral art. It's dry painting, and I was asked to do a piece in here in conjunction with the Iowa Interfaith Exchange. Dry painting is something that every religion, nearly every religion, practices in some form, some branch of its tree. So the Navajo have sand painting for their healing. The Aborigines in Australia do sand painting as well. Tibetan Buddhist monks. Hindu has rangoli with rice powder. So you can find this beautiful carpets of Guatemala. So you find dry painting practiced all over. So this was my attempt, my effort to use that same sort of art form, but to do it in a way that is authentic to my understanding or to my belief system. So I used three materials for the dry painting. I used coffee grounds. For the dark, myrrh was the midtone in orange, and then the highlights were made of sand. When I do work like this, installation art, I like to work in layers. So there are layers of meaning, layers of narrative. Materials that I choose bring a layer of meaning to the piece. So the coffee grounds, for instance, are a mixture of spent coffee grounds and fresh coffee grounds. The spent coffee grounds I have collected from conversations that I've had over the years, important conversations, mundane conversations, conferences that I've attended, schools where I've been in residence. It started when a friend of mine was doing her dying, leaving, and she lived here with us, and there were three of us that shared a studio space together. And we, this was what, 14, 15 years ago, 16, 17 years ago. We met for a cup of coffee to see if we had the courage to rent a studio. We were just beginning as artists, and we didn't have the belief in ourselves, but we had the belief in each other, and so we sort of pooled that together, rented a studio, and made art next to each other for 14 years. It's a kind of intimacy, it's a kind of relationship that's difficult to put into words. So when Andrea had to leave to move back to Virginia to be with her family, to do her dying, so they could take care of her, the three of us gathered in the same coffee shop and said our goodbyes. And so I asked the proprietor of the coffee shop, Zanzibar's, if I could have the coffee grounds from that conversation. And so I've been collecting them ever since, and so I use those as a way to hang on to that spirit, if you will. I also use fresh coffee grounds because I like the idea of conversations that are going to happen, not just the ones that I have had. Myrrh is a material that bookends the life of Jesus. It's an ancient burial spice, and it was used, was given to him by one of the wise men at his birth, which is an unusual gift to give, a burial spice. But the way that I read that story, the way that I interpret it, the king, the wise man who brought that, knew the infant mortality rate was very high and knew that kings die. This infant king should have a decent burial. What's interesting about the tradition surrounding that particular gift, even though Scripture is not specific about even the number of astrologers that came to visit, the Midrash around that has these kings from different parts of the country, and each of a different age, 60 years old, 40 years old, and 20 years old. And as tradition would have it, the one who brought the myrrh was Balthazar, who was from Africa. And so what you have is a 20-year-old black man bringing a burial spice to a baby shower. I think that resonates with our culture today, the reality that young black men face, the death that they face on a regular basis. Myrrh is a gift that changes that whole narrative and grounds the birth in death. But the substance itself is secreted by a tree. It's a resin, a gum resin. Similar, gum resin is similar to sap. Sap carries the nutrients for the tree, and gum resin is secreted to staunch the wound. So what the Dindian tree is doing when it is wounded is it secretes this substance to restore the wholeness. So from the wounds of the tree come this incense, this burial spice, that from the tree's perspective is to restore wholeness. There's something in there that I think is really important. That we have, that creation has within itself, the ability to restore wholeness, that beauty can come out of the wounds, out of the brokenness, but it means that you have to look hard. The sand that I use is two kinds of sand. The white sand on the floor is from several countries, I think 7 or 8, maybe 9 or 10, I've kind of lost track, I have a list somewhere, and probably 10 or 15 different states. And people send me sand and I collect it from places that I've traveled. The sand that was on the top of this oil painting here of the earth is iron sand. It's a magnetic sand that comes from the west coast of the North Island of New Zealand. There was a feather hanging here. It was a dove feather, particularly a particular kind of dove, a Ukrainian skycutter. Ukrainian skycutter has a hyper-flexible wrist joint that allows it to hover in place for a long time, for hours at a time. And so the thought that this dove, this pigeon, is hovering over this broken planet indefinitely, yet suspended over by a silk thread, and the silk thread is attached to the feather by a drop of beeswax. So that is a reference to the story of Icarus and his arrogance in the face of science. He was told by his father, the artist, the scientist, Daedalus, not to fly too low to the water, or the feathers would be waterlogged. Some birds have waterproof feathers, but some of them do not, and if they get waterlogged, they will not be able to repel that water, and so they would then drown. And so Daedalus knew that, and he told that science to his son. He also told him not to fly too close to the sun because the wax would no longer hold when the temperature gets above 140 degrees. So at 140 degrees, this beeswax becomes liquid, and the feather falls to the broken planet.